Welcome to the Retail Tech Podcast. My name is Darius Wasafi, and today I am speaking with Jon Schulz. It's a CMO of a company called Viant, which is in the digital advertising space. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thanks for having me, Darius.
Let's start with a brief background on yourself, how you came to Viant, and then we'll talk about the company.
Sure. Great. Yeah, I started my career, interestingly, more on the client side of advertising. I worked both in automotive and pharmaceuticals, so more from the client perspective of the advertising, and then pivoted to ad tech about 17 years ago. I've been at Viant for 17 years, and I really just found the challenges of the evolving digital advertising channel more interesting. I still love automotive. I still love pharma. I like the client side of the business, but I just really enjoyed the ad tech side, and that's been my focus. And currently, I'm the CMO here at Viant, so I oversee our marketing communications, and I also run our strategic partnerships here.
Okay, and from your background, I saw that you also spent a good amount of time at Ford doing marketing.
Yep. Yeah. So I was in a little bit of a rotational program at Ford, so I did a variety of marketing roles. I had the benefit of wholesaling to dealers, which is a really interesting. If
Hmm.
you've never seen that side of the business, actually being in the dealership, which where the transaction happens. I worked in the parts and service area. I worked at the credit company, of course, a number of marketing roles on the brand teams, and then I spent my last couple of years there running digital and CRM for the US for Ford Motor Company.
Awesome. That's a pretty well-rounded set of skills.
Yep.
Let's talk about Viant. What does Viant do? And then, we'll dig into like specific products.
Yeah, so we're a demand side platform or a DSP. I don't want to use too much jargon, but we're a demand side platform in the programmatic advertising space. So most people are familiar if you're doing digital advertising, you kind of have the walled gardens, you've got the search and the social advertising, and then you've got the open web advertising. So when you hear a lot about like connected TV advertising, digital out of home, basically website type advertising. That's really the space that we operate in.
So a customer wants to do digital advertising. They come to Viant and you tell them all of the different options that are available, correct?
Yeah, typically what happens is they have a goal, right? They have a, I'll put my client side hat on, right? I need to sell more pickup trucks or I need to sell more minivans, right? You have a business problem you're trying to solve. You're trying to build your brand or stimulate demand, or you have a sales event that you're trying to promote. And so it's goal driven. What are you trying to accomplish? And then we work with advertisers and their agencies to find the best path to deliver on those goals.
Okay. And what type of business is, are your main customers right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty agnostic as it relates to different client verticals. So we work with retail, which I know is what your area, consumer packaged goods, automotive, financial services, education, nonprofit, travel and tourism, pharma and healthcare. We work on a variety of different businesses and challenges.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, retail, traditionally, retail is like retail stores and maybe brands and shopping centers, but really the concept of commerce is everywhere. Is all these companies, they need to get customers, they need to sell their products to their customers.
Yep, I
So,
agree.
so yeah, so that's I think that goes across the board. What are the like the key trends that you're seeing right now in digital advertising? And of course, we'll probably, move this into the AI conversation, which is everywhere now. But like, how is like I've heard that marketing is one of the hardest jobs these days. Like CMOs, and I'm sure you have stories, but it's like one of the hardest jobs because things keep changing so much and so fast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, if you follow the trades, and I spent some time on the education side too, teaching at the University of Michigan as well, and so I did a little bit of research. And CMOs have the shortest tenure. If you look at the C-suite, that there's the highest turnover there, and it's very high expectations, right? There's a lot, company growth, driving demand. A lot of that is on the shoulders. If the Super Bowl was last weekend, right? And you think about if I spent $8 million for 30 seconds. How do I calculate an ROI on that? And how do I make sure that that was a good investment for the company and what I'm trying to do and trying to accomplish? So yeah, it's a very, very challenging role. I think the trends now, I don't, digital is not a trend, right? I mean, back in my day, when I was still on the client side, digital was one of the disciplines along with radio and print and broadcast TV and branded entertainment, and it was just a channel. Pretty much everything today is digital. Digital, you won't see a marketing department organized like that anymore. I mean, if you look at the total addressable market in the US from an advertising perspective, digital is probably three-quarters and growing at a faster clip. So it's eclipsing, it is advertising. And within digital, really the biggest trend that we're seeing is connected TV and streaming is really kind of taking over. That's where a lot of the money is being invested. You probably read about that again, going back to the Super Bowl. Yes, it was broadcast on Fox, but their streaming service Tubi was also streaming the game, and that's a much again younger audience segment and a different. A little bit different demographic for advertisers. And so now you're starting to see this. You saw playoff games on Amazon,
Yeah.
Amazon Prime and things like that. So really CTV is growing. It's growing at a much rapid rate, more so than the market at large. And so that's one of the biggest trends. And of course, the other trend, which we're going to dig into, is AI and AI and advertising. Those are probably the two biggest trends that we see.
Why do you think is streaming TV moving so fast? Is it like a consumer pull or is it a push?
I think it's just like any trend that's happened in the industry. I mean, I've been around a long time, so I can remember when smartphones came on the scene, right? And you had the first iPhones come out and then all of the other derivatives, right? You had more time spent than you had investment. So you'd look at the charts and it's like there's still more money going to newspaper and to terrestrial radio, even though the audiences were migrating away from that into other devices. Now, the money sometimes follows the consumers, right? So you look at the rise of streaming and all of the channels and all of the content out there, whether it's Disney Plus or Paramount Plus or Peacock or all these, all the big premium content companies got involved a few years ago and really started scaling. Netflix going ad supported, Amazon Prime going ad supported. Now you've got these huge concentrations of audiences, and the ad dollars are going to move to that, right? Because that's ultimately, as a marketer, what do you want? Is you want your addressable audience, right? You want a big
Mhm.
addressable audience, and you're going to spend where that addressable audience is.
Yeah, so I think that is also probably what you're talking about relates to the concept of retail media networks, which is like, as you said, Amazon and a lot of retailers are is their fastest growing income and highest margin, really. So it's really interesting to me how advertising is changing. Like, we used to like, I've listed things on Amazon before years ago, not recently. And now you can't really do much unless you advertise. The competition is so high. So it's just like the competition is driving this innovation almost.
Right. And there's so many more channels today to get information and to get it instantly. I mean, again, if you go back, it's like most of that retail marketing was in store, right? It was an end cap. When
Mm,
you walked in, it was a display in the aisle. Maybe it was a flyer with coupons or features or things like that that were driving people into the store. Now we're always on, right? You've got your mobile phone with you all the time, right?
yeah.
24/7. You've got all these different ways to be communicated to, and to drive that interest and demand that will then pull people in. And so that's kind of as you've seen the rise of retail media. I mean, retail, if you look at the numbers like eMarketer, retail is probably 30 to 35% of all digital spending. To your point at the onset, Darius, retail is everything, right? Automotive is retail, right? When you
Yeah,
think about the
yeah,
the dealer business, right? QSR, quick service retail like McDonald's and Burger King. I mean, dining, it all falls under that huge umbrella that we call retail, not just, a shopping center or a grocery
right,
store or something
right.
like that. So there's a lot of aspects to retail. It is really dynamic and diverse, and there's just so many different ways now to drive consumer interest and demand. And that's really why there's been a focus, I think, on retail media.
Yeah, yeah. I actually personally like the word commerce better than retail
Mhm.
because it's more, wide reaching. But I think people understand that. So let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla, which is actually doubling its weight every day home, it seems like AI and generative AI. So advertising has been around for long time, right? But I'm
Yep.
I'm sure AI is making changes even on your side as a product developer and solution provider. I'm really interested to learn how Gen AI is changing your business.
Yeah, it is very interesting because as we got in more and more involved in the programmatic space as an organization, and we talked about all the channels, right? If you're omni-channel, that means it's display, it's video, it's digital out of home, it's streaming audio, it's connected television. The complexity of the options. I mean, we talked about this in one of our annual innovation videos, but there's about 98 trillion combinations when you look at channels, audience segments, and ad formats. So when you start to think about how can a human process all those options and do it efficiently and effectively, it's very, very difficult. So it's a problem that's ripe to solve with something like AI. And so that's really last year what we set out to do is say, how can we simplify the complexity of programmatic and digital buying through a simple prompt and allow people to really harness the power of AI to, we talk about giving them a superpower, right? It's not
Right.
replacing humans. It's really just giving them a superpower because again, with 98 trillion combinations, you're likely just going to default to what you know. You're probably not going to be able to explore all of the other potential opportunities out there. There's not enough time in the day, right? So let the technology do that for you.
Yeah, so that is really interesting because even if you have like 98 trillion data points, you're not going to change your like campaigns that quickly between all these things. And that's one of the questions I have is that how will the I guess the placement change when you have the capability to know where is the right place today at 5 o'clock to present this ad on what channel.
Yeah. I think that's really where the machines come in and really where the power of AI comes in is when you start turning over the decisioning pieces of it because there's no way a human can know, right? You can go in and check on the campaign 3 or 4 times a day. You might tweak a couple of things, but really our Viant AI is very much goal driven. So when you go to set up a campaign, it's like, what's your brand? What's your budget? What are your flight dates? And what's your goal? What is your goal? Is it store traffic? Is it online sales? What is the goal, right? And as long as you're optimizing to that goal, if more sneakers are being sold in Chicago than in Miami, then you'll just automatically want to put more money, shift more budget to the markets that are driving the goal, right? What is
Right.
driving? And so as long as you can be clear about the goal and what the goal of the campaign is, the AI can work very, very efficiently and effectively on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, it could even help uh, validate or invalidate your assumptions. Like
Right,
when we set goals, they're all based on assumptions, and
right,
maybe I was wrong. I tell me
right.
as soon as possible that this assumption wasn't right.
Right. Well, we're all creatures of habit, right? We know
Right.
what we know and we don't know what we don't know. So we're gonna lean on what we do know, and we all have biases, and I might think something's more effective than you do, and vice versa. So you let it prove out, and you let it prove out in the performance, and it proves out very quickly. And that optimization, whether it's what creative is driving the most engagement or whatever, that shouldn't be for me to decide or for you to decide because we're just going to have opinions based on our own experience. Let's see what the actual consumer behavior is and let's optimize to performance and hitting the goal.
Yeah, that's an actually you brought a good point in my mind, and that's the concept of integration. So for a campaign for a customer to run smoothly and efficiently, the best option would be for all these systems to be integrated. The content generation, which is also like really being disrupted by AI right now. AI like can actually create really interesting images, even some video, and on the fly. And how integrated is the Viant system? Is that like a big part of like what you do is like integration with marketing tools and like inside of the stack?
Yeah, we're very integrated. I mean, we have 70 plus data partners. So you think, hey, I want to use Experian data segments or TransUnion data segments, or you want to upload your own CRM and audience data, to kind of inform the campaign, different measurement approaches and how you want to measure conversion or incrementality or things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces. And then we talked a little bit about creative too, and understanding which creatives are performing the best, right? That is probably the least scientific part and most opinion driven part of marketing, certainly throughout my whole career, is which ad is, if you have five comps and which one is going to be the best ad, well, why don't you run all five and let the audience, the target customers determine through their engagement which one is the most effective, and then shift the flighting, against what's actually working, and do that in real time and kind of take that, highest paid person's opinion, out of the equation and really just
Right.
let the system do the work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the highest paid person is probably going to be your AI agent pretty soon anyway. So
That's a good point. There you go.
so it may actually come back to that, but I understand the so does Viant actually have that chat interface right now for customers?
Yeah, so last September we launched Viant AI, and basically what Viant AI is it's a simple, if you've ever used Chat GPT, it's a simple chat interface that just allows you to basically build and then ultimately run and measure a campaign, using just a simple chat interface. And what drove us to that, going back to the 98 trillion, is as we built more capability into our DSP and into our terminal, it just got increasingly more and more complicated, right? All these different channels, all these different data segments, all these different things. So you think about user training and certification and the hurdles, and for somebody new coming in, it got very intimidating. But if you go to a prompt and you say, hey, I want to run a campaign for Nike. I've got $5 million for Q2, and my goal is online shoe sales. And it generates a plan. It'll generate a plan.
Right.
It will organize the spend by channel. It'll give you audience recommendations. It'll talk about the competition. It'll do all the different things. So you think about all that legwork that a typical, programmatic trader would have to do. You cut through it very quickly. Now, am I going to suggest that the first iteration of the plan is perfection? Probably not. What you then do is you interact. You say, "Hey, I don't have digital out of home creative. Let's take that channel out, reallocate that money to the other channels appropriately." Things like that. And then that will basically perfect your plan. And then you can launch that plan into the DSP and execute it. And then the AI also works through the bidding process, right? To get the most efficient pricing for those impressions, because these digital auctions are running, you hear the term, QPS, and the queries per second, are in the millions and tens of millions, right? And these are the bid opportunities that you have. So you really let the technology do the work and make sure you're getting the most effective impressions that meet your goals at the most effective price, and then you measure as you go and see how you're doing.
Can you actually maybe go into that bidding process a little bit more? I'm really intrigued as a customer, how it works. It's like a black box for customers.
I don't know, Darius, if I would do it justice, but interestingly enough, we talked a little bit about it in our innovation video in terms of the kind of the 100 millisecond window that you have to do the bidding. And the more efficient you are in that bidding window, it allows the AI to work from a decisioning perspective to know which bids you want to win, which ones you don't want to win. And there's a lot of technical nuances to that. And I'm a little bit technical enough to be dangerous, but certainly not enough to explain our bidding system in great detail. But that's certainly something I'd love to follow up with you on.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, just the concept of programmatic bidding, bidding that goes on in the background is very interesting for me. Just to know, not that I would ever be able to figure it out, but like it's really interesting how you like when my provider, let's say Viant or another company, is actually giving me these recommendations, it's already gone through this complex bidding process
Right.
and with all of their data partners. So I think the bidding goes to maybe like a bidding system
Well,
that all these
there's a
data
lot of
partners.
Yeah, there's a lot of resellers. I mean, that's one of the things, if you hear the term supply path optimization, one of the things that we're working toward as an industry, and certainly Viant is specifically with our direct access program, is to really clean up the programmatic supply chain, because sometimes that one ad impression could surface 20 or 30 times in that 100 millisecond window through all these resellers and different channels. That doesn't really drive efficiency. As a matter of fact, it drives up cost, because every time that gets handed off, somebody wants a piece of that. We call it like the technology tax. And so one of the things we're very focused on, and we're starting with this really more around our connected TV, growth initiative, is really getting directly tied into the premium publishers. So when you buy an ad impression on Disney, we're sourcing that from Disney. We're not sourcing it from 4 or 5 different resellers. We're going right to the source, the publisher, the owner of that
Mhm.
impression, and sourcing that impression. So it speeds up the process. It uses less energy, right? Because you hear about all the energy usage. Well, it's all this recycling that's happening on these impressions. So you really streamline the process and you get more efficient pricing. You take out all the technology tax in the middle, the publisher gets more. At the same time, the advertiser gets a more efficient price. So they both win in the equation, and the loser is all the non-value add resellers in the middle.
It's interesting. It sounds similar to like booking hotel rooms, where you ask for a hotel and this city and in the background they're going through a bidding process probably with different players and
Right.
the time of the day and like there's like these are like so complex, like even the time of the day and what's happening, the weather, all of these things are becoming factors in price.
Right. Capacity utilization, right? Are they 90%
Yeah.
booked, or are they 10% booked? Will affect the price of the room. And of course, if you went to the hotel directly, the hotel would make more money on that booking than going through all these intermediaries on
Right.
behalf of the hotel. So it is a parallel. It is a similar parallel to what we're talking about here.
And I think that's probably where a lot of the coordination and even in retail, for example, right now, if you go on, and we'll get into that more, but if you go into even ChatGPT, you can ask shopping questions, and it's actually starting to show you. It's very basic data right now, but there's like that coordination and matching process is applicable to all of these industries. Like everywhere, if you want to buy insurance, there is a matching process in the back to detect what you're, and it doesn't matter if you're telling it to an AI agent or you're going to a form on, Expedia.com for hotel booking or something. But that matching process is really interesting and complex. And I bet like there's a whole part of how AI is changing that. I'm just thinking about like a different part of this the tech side,
Yeah. Yeah,
which is
it is
very
it is
interesting.
very complicated. We as users of it get to see it simplified, right? We don't understand all the ones and zeros that are flying around in the background, but it is very complex and complicated.
Data. People are saying data is the new oil or the new gold or the new whatever. Is data a moat for businesses?
Um, it depends. The way I would answer it is this. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that most companies' most valuable asset is their CRM or their customer database, right? That is when you think about their value prop, you could argue no, it's their brand or whatever, but their customer data is one of, if it's not their biggest asset, it's one of their most valuable assets, right? And so
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, being able to act on that efficiently and effectively is it has been elusive a little bit, relative to the digital side. There are services that can do onboarding to cookies, which of course are going away and stuff like that. But to really be able to leverage a company's customer database, and it's not, it's interesting because if you have conversations with big brands, in some ways they don't want to over message their most valuable customers either, right? There's a protectionism there to say this group is our elite customers. They are our highest value customers. We do not want to over message
Yeah.
them and overdo it or turn them off in any way. So it's how do you manage the different audience versus the fence sitters, which buy your product sometimes, other times they don't. They're you can influence that group, right? And so maybe you would have a little bit more messaging against that group. So your customer database and then segmenting that into the different groups and then how you go after that, effectively and efficiently. So yeah, data is a differentiator. If you look at retail, for example, the retailers hold the data, right? Because that's where the transaction happens, not the CPG companies or the companies that actually make the products because they sell through the retailer. So it's the retailer that has that customer relationship, the loyalty card, that's where the transaction actually happens. So in that equation, some big companies like Procter and Gamble and Unilever and stuff really don't have a lot of customer information, unlike the Walmarts and the Amazons and stuff, which have a ton of customer data because they transact with the customer.
What about for companies like yourself, like Viant? You have access to a lot of data sources,
Yeah.
and these data sources are probably available to your competitors as well.
Yes.
Is there a differentiation in the amount of data that a DSP, like a company like Viant actually has, that would be a differentiator in making a decision?
Yeah, I think I'd say the answer is yes. There are a lot of data companies, and those data companies are agnostic, and they pretty much work with everyone. But it really depends on the DSP themselves and how they approach the identity management piece of it. For Viant, we knew a decade ago that cookies were going to be transient and likely going away. Our thesis was more that the rise of mobile phones and apps made rendered cookies less effective and less, universal. It actually turned out to be more just privacy law and different things that in browsers just deprecating cookies that kind of put it in the background. But we very much focus our universal identifier is called household ID. And our household ID is premised again in the name on the household, right? Because we believe that the buying entity is the household. You won't plan a trip or buy a car or do those other things without getting your unit involved, right? And that's pretty typical. And so we ground our household ID to physical address. So, and again, it's an identifier that big tech doesn't control, right? You can't
Mhm.
shut off home address, right? Google can't say I'm deprecating home addresses or I'm blocking. That's kind of the U.S. Postal Service, right? So
Right.
you've got the home address, and that's the unit, and then you've just got a multitude of identifiers that point back to that household, right? Some digital identifiers, so the household ID is mapped. If there's a cookie present, maybe there's an IP address, maybe there's other digital identifiers, device identifiers, or things that map back to that. There's the personal information like the email addresses or the different things, the mobile numbers that are resident within that address, again, that map back to that household ID. And there's third-party identifiers. So it could be, ID5 or a ramp ID or something like that. So we're not pushing. Our identifier is basically to link together all of the other points of identity, right? So we just had a press release last month where we talked about our identity spine, and we basically cover 95% of US households. So we have a very, very strong footprint. In that release, we talked about our newest relationship with TransUnion and what we're doing there to basically enrich the household ID in our base. But yeah, I think every major DSP has some form of identification, and it's just how they approach it and how they use it. We don't feel like email address as a proxy in and of itself is the only thing that you should use. So ours is a lot more holistic than that.
So you are mapping what you th who you think is living at an address with all the other data that could link to these people that are residing at that address.
Well,
Correct?
again,
Is
and
that
it's not, and it's not, I think sometimes people confuse it because they think it's about the individual. It's not about the individual. When I was advertising at Ford Motor Company, I didn't want to sell one truck. I wanted to sell 500,000 or 750,000, right? So it's not about the specific individual. It's about the target audience and the propensity to find that target audience across the country to scale and sell your product to the appropriate audience. So it's not necessary. So the signals could vary, right? So if we're looking at in-market auto intenders versus somebody likely to buy Apple headphones versus somebody likely to buy a box of cereal or something like that, there's a lot of different indicators that could make somebody likely. Maybe past purchase behavior, maybe where they live, maybe a variety of things. Household composition, there could be a variety of things that could be indicators of a high propensity to be a potential customer.
you mentioned that streaming TV or programmatic TV is one of the fastest growing or the fastest growing segment. How does that impact, let's say, search advertising? Is search losing ground at the benefit of streaming?
I'm not sure if it's losing ground. Certainly the growth is slowing. I mean, if you look at Google's most recent earnings, I would say the growth is slowing. You could attribute that to a number of things. You could say it's such a high volume, it's such a big percentage of spend, it can't grow, double digits and indefinitely. Eventually there's saturation. But what I would argue is effectiveness and impact. I would tell you that when somebody searches, it's probably the last thing that they do. And it's not the reason that they're buying the product. It's not even the reason that they're aware of the product. They're aware of the product because they saw the TV ad. They saw the TV ad or the CTV or the streaming ad for this product that they never heard of. Then they went in and researched it. They went online, maybe they did a search or they went into Chat GPT and they learned more about the product. And then ultimately they bought it. But the last thing they did might have been a search. And so search is getting the credit for that
Right,
conversion. When
right.
in actuality, if you didn't, and we've done studies on this with advertisers, if you took the CTV component away, the conversion plummets. Because if you
Mm,
don't, how can you search on something you're not aware of?
yeah.
Right. You have to be made aware of it, right? And you're most generally not aware of something to type it in search. You're already aware of it by the time you get to search. So what we talk to advertisers about in terms of the power of connected TV advertising is it's really driving incrementality. It's driving new business, right? It's how you ultimately become aware of products that you then will ultimately transact on. If you take that out of the equation, you have to know about it to search on it. So all what search is doing is existing customers. It's churning through your customer base and people that are already aware of your product. It's not necessarily driving net new business. And that's really where open web advertising at large and specifically connected TV advertising is a great catalyst to drive that new product awareness to then ultimately bring those customers in.
How many touch points or different type of interfaces do you think is needed right now to build awareness and actually make a conversion for a brand new user?
It depends on the product. Again, I would, you go back to what you know. The automotive purchase process is 3 to 6 months. There's going to be hundreds of touch points during that process. If you're buying, something that's going to cost you 50, 60, $80,000, you're probably not going to just pull up and grab the first one that you see and walk away, right? Like you might with a tube of toothpaste or a roll of paper towel or something like that. So it depends on the product in terms of how involved and long that purchase cycle is. And then the repurchase, process again with a vehicle could be 5 years, could be 7 years. I mean, there's not a simple answer to that question to just say it's this many, and it really depends on the product and the nature of it, the value, the investment. There's a number of factors that drive that.
When you look at your range of retail customers, is there a concentration in some product categories?
We do pretty well in like dining and QSR, quick service retail. So like fast food, I guess if you want to use the handle, we do pretty well there. That's a higher turn, customer from a retail perspective. But we work with a variety of retailers. We work with, big box stores. We work with grocery. We work with, quite a variety. And to your point, if you define it as commerce, that's an
Right.
awful lot of companies.
Okay. Yeah, because I definitely agree that the product categories, every product category has its own nuances and its own personality almost. And you can't treat all of them the same. And sometimes, like when you're working with a partner, the more intrinsic information and experience that they have more human insights that even an AI agent may not have. So I think that's what would be interesting. And I'm thinking. So you said that you work with all kinds of different companies.
Mhm.
Do you work with like startups in the commerce e-commerce business?
Probably not as much. I mean, we can. We're not delimited. Like we don't work with, automotive or we don't work with pharmaceutical. We're pretty open, but I would say it kind of depends on, our platform is probably a little bit more effective for people that advertise at scale. It's not like if you think about an AdWords interface, you could put in your credit card and you could have $100 monthly cap and you could put some keywords out there or whatever and get some cost per click activity or whatever. Our platform isn't really set up that way. We do things at scale. We tend to work through whether it's advertisers directly or their agencies, different layers of creative execution and things like that. So it just depends. It really depends on what their goal is, and where their investment is as well.
Okay, and then from that point, so is there like a minimum budget, advertising budget that you look for in uh, defining what your prospects are going to be?
Yeah, I think that, especially if it's somebody that's new to advertising, they're going to require support and it's a little bit higher touch. Yeah, I mean, we tend to work with people that are spending, 25, $50,000, from a campaign perspective, and again, we want it to be a win-win,
Right,
right? With
right,
with advertisers. It doesn't make sense for us to deploy, a lot of resource against a very tiny
right.
investment, not a sustainable model. So you want to be right fit, right? If there was somebody, and
Exactly.
I've had colleagues, I've had friends come to me, hey, I'm starting this business or I'm looking to do this. I may recommend them go somewhere else. I may look at this, or you might want to look at that because I think that might be a better fit for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and
Or
that's really what, yeah, what
yeah.
I'm trying to get is that I think it's more efficient for everybody to make sure that the conversation with the customer starts at least at the foundation level, there is a fit.
Mhm. I
And
agree.
that's what
I
I'm,
agree.
yeah,
You want a good match because you want it to be
yeah,
successful. We can run a campaign with somebody one time, but if it's not going to be it's not going to repeat and it's not going to build, then there's not really a lot of lifetime value there, right?
right.
So we want to make sure it's a win-win. We want to make sure we can meet their goals and help them hit their KPIs and what they want to do, and we can do it in an efficient way for us as well. So we want it to be a win-win situation.
So let's say, for example, a customer starts advertising using Viant. What are the metrics today in 2025 that people should be measuring for programmatic TV, for example?
Yeah, we're out there with something that we call conversion contribution. So that is when we talk about driving incrementality and truly bringing in net new customers. That's what we're talking about with conversion contribution, not recycling the same people, not last click attribution, but really driving net new business and driving incrementality. That's what I would recommend advertisers focus on, and that's really what's going to impact their business in the most positive way.
So retention contribution, how is that calculated? Like you said, like if you see a TV ad and then you compare it with a Google campaign and you compare the with or without, and that's is that how it's defined?
Right. We did a study recently with Circana, which is one of our partners, and they're obviously big in the CPG and retail space. And we saw that when you use connected TV advertising in a holistic campaign, that I can't remember, I'm going to probably misstate the number, but it was about 172% more impact than if you didn't include the connected TV advertising. Again, most people get very focused on the lower funnel and the conversion piece, and they miss what we talked about earlier, which is if I'm not aware of it, how can I search on it? How can I buy it, right? So it's really focusing on what's contributing to the conversion. What is driving? What are the touch points and what is driving the conversion so you can really understand from a media mix perspective what is making the biggest impact without just defaulting to the last click.
If you had a $25,000 budget, how would you split it between TV and other things?
What am I selling?
You're selling, um, good question. Let's say you are selling women's activewear.
And is it an established brand or is it a brand new product nobody's ever heard of?
Let's say a new product.
So it's a new women's product, so new to the market. I would definitely skew heavily towards connected TV because your challenge there is nobody knows about your product. If we were talking about Lululemon or we were
Right.
talking about Nike or something like that, then maybe it would be more incentive or promotional advertising or something. But I have this huge brand halo that I can lean on, right, to drive the credibility and the understanding of the product. I would need the storytelling, the sight, sound, and motion of a video ad to be able to introduce this new product and really engage people to be able to, drive conversion.
Okay, I appreciate that. What about local? Do you see like really focusing on a local area actually provides more benefit than trying to go cross country? I mean, even for large businesses.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your example, if I only had $25,000, it wouldn't be a national, it wouldn't be a
Right.
national campaign because I couldn't have any critical mass, right? So in that regard, I would probably have my team do some market research and try to find the markets that are most favorable for that product category, vis-a-vis the competition and stuff like that. And I would concentrate it in the number of markets where I could have enough reach and frequency to be impactful without spreading it too thin. Because again,
Right.
it's just one impression. If I get that one impression, okay, I might remember it, I might not remember it, then I see it again, then I see it again. Okay, that's interesting. I might go check that out.
That
Or if
starts to register.
it
Right.
starts to register, right? So you got to have at some critical depth. Otherwise, just having one impression across the country probably going to be lost on most people, and you probably won't get a lot of pull through.
For brand advertising, for a new brand, how many months do you recommend to continue?
Again, it really depends on the brand, the resonance of the brand, if it's brand new or if it's established. The product itself, is it very high cost or is it pretty low? Is it a new
Mhm.
pair of socks or is it a bespoke suit that costs, $3,500 or, so it really depends on the level of involvement, customer involvement. You can make quicker purchase decisions and try things that are at a relatively low price point, right? I don't
Right.
think there's not a high risk, right? If I go to the store and I buy something that's 25 bucks and I don't like it, it's not that big of a deal. If I spend $2,500 on something and I don't like it, it's a little bit bigger of a disappointment, right? So
Right.
I think there is an involvement piece of it based on the product that you're talking about. Again, from my background with automotive, we were dealing in very high priced, expensive products that required a lot of comparison, a lot of research, things like that. Whereas a packaged goods company, if it's a, tube of toothpaste or a pack of dental floss, pretty low risk. If I try it and I don't like it, I just don't buy it again.
Yeah, so for that the women's activewear brand that we just created,
Yeah.
um, like I mean, so just to set expectations, like that's like one of the biggest things is like to set the right expectations
Yep.
and not make a wrong decision because your expectation was wrong or was off. So I'm thinking like if you just do advertising for a month and then you stop and you say, okay, it didn't work, that's probably not a good gauge.
No, no, it's not. It's not. It's a commitment and it's an ongoing thing, and you have to be committed to it because again, it's recency as well as the frequency in terms of if I saw it, but then I don't see it again. We are bombarded. We
Yeah.
see thousands of ad impressions every day, whether we're conscious to it or not. We do. Just walking down the street, watching TV, doing whatever we do, listening to podcasts, we're bombarded with lots of messages, right? So it doesn't take long for something to get out of our consciousness and back in the archives. That can happen pretty quickly. And that's why you see, I mean, sometimes it's almost annoying and is annoying. Some of these, insurance company ads and stuff that, yeah, I mean, you can't get away from them. It's just nonstop, but they don't know when your policy is going to come due for renewal, right?
Yeah.
It happens 365 days a year, right? Yours is different than mine is different than somebody else's. So they want to be top of mind.
Not yet. Not
Yeah.
yet. With
Yeah.
AI agents, they'll probably know when the renewal is
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. They can
Yeah.
be a lot smarter about it and maybe eliminate some of that waste, right? Why are they advertising to me? I just renewed a month ago. I'm about as out of market for insurance as I could possibly be, right? So wouldn't it be great if they knew that and that ad didn't show at my house and it went somewhere else where they knew people were due to renew in the next 30 days or something like that. So there's a lot of efficiency that can be had for sure.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
think it makes you optimistic about, our work isn't done. We've got a long way to go.
Oh, we just opened up a new can of worms, and this thing is like a rabbit's hole. It's just unbelievable how the opportunities just start to come to mind as you do one thing and the other. What kind of Gen AI tools do you use in your work? I'm
Yeah,
sure you use like the basic like ChatGPT and things, right?
yeah, I mean, we there's three or four different agents that we use behind Viant AI. I think that the Open AI agent is probably the most predominant one, but there's three or four other agents, and that's a constant experimentation as well. And then we use not only our own data, like our historical campaign data to train Viant AI, but we've done deals with like ComScore and we're working with other companies to ingest more data because again it's a continuously learning thing. It's never a check the box, we're done. You're
Right.
always, and then now we're starting to do custom deployments where we're working with bigger advertisers, ingesting their data, their preferences, like I like this publisher more than this publisher and things like that. So the recommendations are being driven by past performance and preferences and things like that. Maybe they have deals in place with certain publishers or data companies or things like that. So we're constantly evolving in what we're doing, and that's the fun part. Is it doesn't get boring. It's
Yeah.
very there's so much going on, and we're just kind of scratching the surface really in terms of what we can do at CES this year in our booth in the C Space in the ARIA. We had demo terminals where we were demoing Viant AI and our kind of prototype for measurement. So when you think about campaign measurement, and our advanced reporting suite comes back with a 40-page, PDF of all this campaign information, right? I mean, endless amounts. It's all very valuable, but at that moment, I may not need to know everything, right? I might just want to know what are the top five performing markets, right?
Yeah.
That might be on page 37. So I got to, how do, just ask it. What are the top performing markets for my campaign? Boom, 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 boom. Just like it populates, here's your top
Yeah.
five performing market percentage of convert, everything else. What are my top performing creatives? Boom, 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 boom. It just populates it back out and you can just see so you can interact with the prompt and get the answers that you're looking for without having to traverse a menu system, know what page of the report that particular data point is on. You just get it. And and
That's one of
and
the
when
beauties, yeah, of
yeah,
Gen
and when you
AI.
think about it in terms of an efficiency and what you do every day, You come up with questions, all the questions you asked me today, I come up with questions for my team or what. If I could just get the answers that quickly, how much easier it would be to just kind of navigate through a typical day. And so
Right.
really what we're looking to do is again create this superpower for the programmatic traders to just drive a lot more efficiency in the non-glamorous things that they have to do as part of their job so they can spend more time really thinking about the important things.
Okay, great. So we're coming on time. I want to finish by asking you some, like, personally, what what do you think is changing in the way that you hire for a marketing team? Like, I'm sure you have roles that are probably open. What are you
Yep.
looking for, and what new skills are you looking for the people that are you're hiring now?
That's a really interesting question, Darius. And I sometimes, really reflect on that. But with the tools that we have today, and the capabilities that we have. I think about, I rewind to when I was coming out of school and I was learning specific, it was pre-internet, I was learning specific software packages. I could program in DOS, I knew COBOL, I knew all these different things that are completely irrelevant now. But recruiters looked for what were you certified in, what were you trained in, and stuff like that. And that's, today it's not as much about that. Really, what I look for is tenacity. I really look for people that are problem solvers that can figure things out. That's kind of the core value here at Viant is figure it out. So if I was going to kind of create a mantra, but I'm not looking for a specific education or degree at a specific school or anything like that. I'm looking for people that really have tenacity, that have grit, that are going to work hard and solve problems. And they're not going to get tied up, like, oh my gosh, the answer isn't the first thing I tried. I don't know what to do. I want people that are gonna roll up their sleeves and they're really gonna dig in and they're gonna look for new and better ways because the tools that we have at our disposal are so robust. They don't have to be heavy researchers or things like that. You more have to interpret the data and know how to do and problem solve. It could actually, it's the opposite problem. It's overwhelming how much
Hmm.
information and data we have, but it's sifting through that and really finding the nuggets or the gems that are going to drive it. But it's that personal mentality of just the tenacity and the grit that I'm gonna not be outworked by anybody and I'm gonna get the job done. Good teammate, strong values, but that's more than anything what we're looking for. It's not a degree from a specific school or a certain certification or anything like that. It's those intangibles that really separate people today.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like what we used to call soft skills are becoming even more important, and there'll be more of the differentiator when you're interviewing
Yeah.
to build your team.
I've seen a departure from some of that. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but it just feels like there's not as the depth is a little bit more superficial at times and people aren't willing and if there's any adversity at all or something doesn't work exactly right the first time, it's I don't know what to do and things like that. It's really being able to cut through that and having the gumption and the wherewithal to just, like I said, figure it out. Figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, that's something that you can't really teach.
Right.
I mean, you learn by experience and life experience, of course, but it's really hard for a company to teach that to a new recruit.
Right. I can teach you the software. I can
Yeah.
teach you how to use certain tools, but if you don't have that drive and that gumption and that tenacity, it's going to be difficult to teach somebody that if they just don't have it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been really fascinating speaking with you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome.